You know that moment you're scrolling through your accounts late at night and you see it. The savings account sitting at the exact same interest rate it's had since the day you opened it. The retirement contribution percentage you set up the day you got hired and never touched again. The life insurance quote you got 2 years ago and never actually bought. The credit card balance you've been meaning to move to something with a lower rate. Every single one of those has the same quiet voice attached to it. I'll figure it out later. Maybe it's the raise you never actually asked for because the timing never felt quite right and there was always a busier week coming up. Maybe it's the beneficiary on an old account that's still listed as someone from a completely different chapter of your life. None of these things feel urgent on any individual Tuesday. That's exactly what makes them so expensive. And here's the thing. You're not lazy and you're not bad with money. You're doing something so common it actually has a name in behavioral economics, and once you understand what it really costs, you will never say that sentence the same way again, because I'll figure it out later isn't free. It isn't a pause button. It's a loan, a real one with a real interest rate, and you took it out against your own future without ever signing anything or even realizing the paperwork existed. My name is Jack. I'm 56, and I've left my own loops open longer than I'd like to admit, the exact kind I'm about to walk you through, and I've watched firsthand what it actually costs once later quietly turns into 3 or 4 years. If you've ever opened an app, seen something that needed fixing, and closed it instead, this video is for you, no matter where you're starting from or how old you are. If this changes how you look at the things you've been putting off, hit subscribe. It actually helps more than you'd think. Quick note before we go further, I'm not a financial advisor and nothing here is financial advice, just patterns I've watched play out over and over in real numbers. Let's start with why this happens, because it isn't a character flaw, it's wiring. Researchers have a name for it. Present bias, sometimes called hyperbolic discounting. The basic finding, repeated across decades of studies, is that people consistently value an immediate certain comfort far more than a future uncertain cost, even when that future cost is dramatically larger. Your brain isn't malfunctioning when it chooses not dealing with this right now over dealing with this and feeling slightly annoyed for 20 minutes. It's doing exactly what it was built to do. The problem is that modern financial decisions don't punish you in 20 minutes. They punish you 11 years later in a number you never even see being subtracted. What makes this especially tricky is that the decision itself almost never feels big enough to justify the effort. Switching a savings account feels like a 15-minute errand competing against an already exhausting day, so the day wins every time on its own terms. Bumping a contribution percentage feels like risking money you're already using to cover everything else, so it gets pushed to after things settle down, and things rarely settle down on a fixed schedule. Each individual postponement looks completely reasonable in isolation. It's only when you zoom out across years that the pattern turns into a number large enough to actually notice. Yeah, that's the actual trap hiding inside this whole pattern. The cost of later never shows up as a charge on a statement. It shows up as the absence of money that was never there to begin with, and absence is invisible by definition. You cannot feel a number that never arrived in your account. There's no notification for it, no red text, just a quieter version of your financial life than the one you could have had, and you'll likely never know exactly how much quieter unless someone actually runs the numbers for you. So let's run them. Let's take 4 completely ordinary, I'll figure it out later moments, the kind almost everyone has sitting somewhere in their life right now, and watch what they genuinely add up to. First one, the account you never moved. A huge number of people are sitting on cash in a regular savings account paying close to nothing, somewhere around 4 or 5/10%, when a basic high yield savings account, the kind you can open online in about 10 minutes, is paying somewhere closer to 4.5%. Say you've got $15,000 parked there. At the low rate over 5 years, that money earns you roughly $300 total. At the higher rate, compounding the whole time, that same $15,000 earns you closer to $3,600. You didn't lose money in the dramatic sense. You just left more than $3,000 sitting on a table you walked past every single day for 5 years, because moving it always felt like a task for later. Second one, the contribution you never raised. There's a well-known study from behavioral economists Richard Thaler and Shlomo Benartzi built around a program they called Save More Tomorrow. The idea was simple. Instead of asking people to manually increase their retirement contribution every year, which almost nobody actually follows through on, the program increased it automatically by a small amount with every raise. The participants using the automatic version saw their savings rate climb from under 4% to nearly 14% within a few years, without ever having to consciously decide to do it again. The people left on the manual setting stayed almost exactly where they'd started, year after year. Now translate that into real dollars. If you're earning $70,000 a year and you simply never raise your contribution percentage for an entire decade, not because you couldn't afford to, but because increasing it always felt like a problem for later, you're not just missing a single percentage point here and there. Across a typical growth trajectory, that one frozen habit can cost somewhere in the range of $40,000 to $60,000 by the time you retire. Not from a bad investment choice, from a number you simply never touched. Third one, the coverage you meant to buy. Term life insurance gets more expensive every single year you wait, because the pricing is built almost entirely on age, and age only moves in one direction. Get a quote at 45 and finally buy the policy at 55 instead. And depending on the term length and coverage amount, your premium can land 30 to 70% higher for the entire rest of that policy. Stretch that gap across a 20-year term, and that one I'll get to it decade can easily add $8,000 to $15,000 in extra premiums for coverage you could have locked in years earlier for meaningfully less, protecting the exact same people. Fourth one, the balance you never consolidated. Plenty of people are carrying a credit card balance at 20 to 25% interest. Fully aware that a personal loan or a balance transfer option exists somewhere in the 7 to 12% range, and they genuinely intend to deal with it, they just haven't gotten around to the application. On a balance of $8,000, that interest rate gap alone can cost an extra $1,200 to $1,800 a year in interest that serves absolutely no purpose except funding someone else's profit while you wait for a calmer moment to deal with it. Now add it up. A few thousand from the savings account, $40,000 to $60,000 from the frozen contribution, $8,000 to $15,000 from the insurance delay, a few thousand a year compounding from the debt. You don't need all four hitting you at once to clear $50,000 over time. Most people, if they're being honest with themselves for a second, are running at least two of these right now without even thinking about it as a cost. And there's a fifth one worth mentioning because it's probably the quietest of them all, the raise you never asked for. Researchers who study salary negotiation, including work coming out of Carnegie Mellon, have found something fairly consistent. The gap between people who negotiate their pay and people who simply accept the first number tends to compound because every future raise, every bonus calculation, and in some cases every retirement contribution match gets calculated as a percentage of whatever the existing number already is. A single unasked for raise early on, say an extra $5,000 a year that you decided to bring up next review instead, doesn't just cost you $5,000 once. Carried across 2 or 3 decades of percentage-based increases on top of it, that one postponed conversation can quietly and cost well into 6 figures by the time you're looking back at it, not because anyone did anything wrong, but because nobody ever actually had the conversation. That's the real price of I'll figure it out later. It was never actually zero. It was just hidden somewhere you weren't looking, quietly accumulating against you while you went about your normal life. Here's the part that matters even more than any of those individual numbers, though. Every time you postpone one of these decisions, you're not just losing money in the literal sense, You're reinforcing a version of yourself that treats financial decisions as things that happen to you instead of things you actually do. And every time you close one of these loops, move the account, raise the contribution, get the quote, make the call, you're proving something different about who you are. You're becoming someone who doesn't leave open loops lying around, quietly collecting interest against them. That shift matters more than people give it credit for, because behavior tends to follow identity, not the other way around. The person who closes loops quickly isn't smarter than you, and they probably aren't more disciplined in some abstract sense either. They simply stopped treating later as an actual plan. And here's the encouraging part. Once you've closed one loop, really finished one, the next one gets noticeably easier, because now you have proof sitting right in front of you that you're capable of doing it. This is also why so many of these loops travel in packs instead of arriving one at a time. A person who's comfortable leaving an old savings account untouched is usually, without much surprise, the same person who hasn't gotten around to the insurance quote either, and probably the same person who's been meaning to ask about that raise for about a year and a half now. It isn't that they're careless across the board, it's that the same internal voice, the one that says this can wait, gets used for all of it every time until something forces the conversation. The good news hiding inside that is just as consistent. Closing one loop tends to quiet that voice across all of them, not just the one you handled. So let's close some of these loops right now in a way that actually sticks instead of becoming one more thing on the list. Step 1. Make an actual list of every open financial loop you're currently carrying. Not from memory, write it down somewhere you'll see again on paper or in your phone, whichever one you'll actually look at twice. The account you haven't moved, the contribution you haven't raised, the quote you never followed up on, the balance you haven't consolidated, the conversation about your pay that keeps getting pushed to after this next busy stretch. Most people have never once seen their own later list written out fully in one place, and seeing it on paper does something that simply thinking about it never does. It turns a vague, floating feeling of I should probably handle that at some point into a finite, countable list with a clear end to it. Step 2. Pick the smallest item on that list and close it within the next 24 hours. Not the biggest one, the smallest. If switching your savings account takes 15 minutes on your phone, do that one first today. If it's a 5-minute phone call to ask when you can revisit your salary, put it on tomorrow's calendar before you finish watching this. The goal here isn't maximum dollar impact right away. The goal is proof. Proof that you're someone who closes loops instead of quietly collecting them for years at a time. That proof is exactly what makes the next step actually possible instead of just another idea you liked for a day. Step 3. Schedule the rest, don't just intend them. Pick actual dates on a real calendar for the bigger ones, the insurance quote, the debt consolidation call, the contribution increase, the overdue conversation about your pay, and treat those dates the way you'd treat a doctor's appointment, not a vague hope for sometime soon. A loop with a specific date attached to it tends to actually get closed. A loop with only an intention attached to it quietly becomes next year's I'll figure it out later. And at this point, you already know exactly what that one ends up costing. Here's what I want you to genuinely sit with for a second. Somewhere in your life right now, there is a number quietly accumulating against you, not because you made some dramatic bad decision, but because you postponed a decision that was never actually difficult, just never urgent enough in the moment to beat out later. That number has likely been growing the entire time you've been watching this video, completely unnoticed, the same way it's been growing for months or years before today. Nobody is going to send you a notice when later finally becomes never. There's no deadline that flashes red, no bank employee who calls to check in. The only signal you'll ever get is the quiet feeling years from now of wondering where a chunk of money should have been and wasn't. You have the chance right now to make sure that feeling never has a reason to show up. You don't have to fix everything tonight, and honestly, trying to would probably backfire. You just need to close one loop. Pick the smallest one on your list. Do it before you go to bed tonight, while this is still fresh in your mind and the excuse hasn't had time to rebuild itself. If this changed how you're looking at the things you've personally been putting off, drop a comment and tell me which loop you're closing first, because I genuinely read every single one. And if you want to understand exactly what saving your first real $10,000 actually does to your brain and your bank account, that video is right here waiting for you next.